Joe McCarthy, Richard Nixon, Studebaker, television, North Korea, South Korea, Marilyn Monroe.
We got the fire, fire, fire. Yeah, we got the fire, fire, fire. And we gonna let it burn, 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 burn. We gonna let it burn, 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 burn. Gonna let it burn, 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 burn. We gonna let it burn, 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 burn. We don't wanna leave. Ooh, turn the temperature higher. 'Cause I'm burning up for you, baby.
Burning up in this place tonight. The crowd is singing.
These are the things we lost, the things we lost in the fire, fire, fire. These are the things we lost, the things we lost in the fire, fire, fire. Through the fire, to the limit, to the wall. For a chance to be with you, I'd gladly risk it all.
She's just a girl and she's on fire. Hotter than a fantasy, lonely like a highway. She's living in a world and it's on fire, filled with catastrophe, but she knows she can fly away.
Good afternoon, Period 6. Welcome to Channel 4 News. Today, Alex and I are taking you back in time to 1950 to explore some interesting changes in our cultural and political society.
During 1950, there were many cultural changes affecting American society that are still significant today in 2014. These important changes were brought up in literature, music, fashion, sports, and entertainment. Kat has all the details for you she has been collecting over the past few weeks.
The first cultural influence I'm going to talk about is the television. The first television was successfully demonstrated in California on September 7, 1927, by Philo Taylor Farnsworth. Television became popular in the late 1940s and the early 1950s. Most large cities had only one station. Sets in those days had 10-inch screens and were in black and white. The number of television sets in use rose from 6,000 in 1946 to some 12 million by 1951. Color was introduced in 1951, but it was years later until color television became universally popular. Television also played an important role in politics because the news could now cover presidential debates and conventions. Television was very important in informing and educating the public about political affairs and cultural newcomings. The next cultural influence I'm going to talk about is Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe was born on June 1st, 1926 in Los Angeles. She was a world-known model, actress, and singer who became known as a popular sex symbol. Some of her biggest acting roles were in The Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, The 7-Year Itch, and Some Like It Hot. She was married to baseball hero Joe DiMaggio and later author of The Crucible, Arthur Miller. She was also rumored to have relationships with President John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, as well as mafia boss Joe Giancona. On August 5, 1962, Monroe was found dead in her home. Later autopsy proved Monroe had acute barbiturate poisoning, or in other words, a drug overdose. The LAPD ruled it probable suicide, and many other conspiracies were later circulated of her death. It was later reported that President Kennedy was the last person Monroe had called. Another important aspect of 1950 culture were the automobiles, most importantly the Studebaker. It was a very important car in 1950. The styling consisted of a torpedo front end and a rear window. People joked that the car looked like it was going backwards. The company went out of business in 1966. well as cultural changes, America experienced political conflicts, rise of communism, and felt the consequences of new war. Alex has all the details for you.
An important part of American history was Joseph McCarthy's actions and the upbringing of McCarthyism. Joe McCarthy was a senator from Wisconsin. He was best known for his work chairing the Senate Committee on Government of Operations, which focused on suspected communists in the government. He was known for his brutal interrogations of suspects, resulting in ruining the lives of both guilty and innocent people. It was later noted that McCarthy would be careful not to interrogate suspects who might resist his efforts. Usually, he picked on people with weak personalities. While investigating possible communists in the U.S. Army, the Army's Attorney General, Joseph Welch, responded to McCarthy's interrogation of a young soldier. He told McCarthy, "Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You've done enough. Have you no sense of decency, sir?" Since the hearings were broadcasted on national television, millions realized that these interrogations were not right, had no evidence. The hearings soon ended and McCarthy was left in disfavor. The next political figure we'll be talking about today is 37th President Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was a member of the House of Representatives from California when he became involved in the trial of Alger Hiss, who was accused of being a communist spy. Nixon presented evidence that helped prove Hiss guilty in 1950. This advanced Nixon's political career and he soon ran for the Senate and won. Nixon later became vice president under Dwight Eisenhower. Years later, he became president of the United States in 1969. Interestingly enough, Nixon would later become the first U.S. president to ever resign in 1974 due to the Watergate scandal and possible impeachment. Geographically speaking, Korea is a very important part of the U.S. history as well. Korea was split into North and South after World War II along the 34th parallel. North Korea became established as a communist dictatorship by Soviet Union and Red China after Japan was defeated. In 1950, North Korea attacked South Korea, starting the Korean War. The United Nations entered the war to defend South Korea. The Soviet Union made the mistake of walking out on the United Nations vote, allowing the measure to pass. Since declaring war was not acceptable without approval by Congress, President Harry Truman declared the fighting a police action to allow the entry of American troops. The war resulted in a stalemate and Korea is still divided to this day. Korea was split into North and South Korea along the 34th parallel. Hollywood is where Marilyn Monroe was discovered and worshipped. Richard Nixon was elected as Senator of California in 1950. Wheeling, West Virginia is where Joseph McCarthy delivered a speech that would later be the beginning of McCarthyism.
It's alright.
America! I can't do this!
The smile's turning.
Fires, it was always burning since the world's been.
It seems like since it's been here. Here comes
Like, you may know my name, but like, you don't know my story.
the sun, I say.